Welcome back to another episode of TERF Talk Down Under. I'm Stasia, and with me is Angela. How's it going, Ange? Hi. So, what's been happening this week?
Lots of stuff. I've had no power for a couple of days, so I'm a bit behind the eight ball. So yeah, do you want to let us know?
Well, look, I think the BBC article about trans women pressuring lesbians into having sex with them is pretty powerful. And, you know, compare that to the sort of stories that are running over here in Australia. And I reckon we're about 2 years behind here in Australia. What do you think?
Yeah, it could be 2 years, but we're also 2 years into self-ID. So the way back is going to be a lot harder for us because we already have sex self-ID. And we've also been in lockdown for a couple of years. So the true impact of men being able to identify themselves into any space hasn't really been felt. And now that we're out of COVID lockdown, we're going to start seeing men coming into women-only spaces and having to deal with them. I've already experienced it personally, and I know other women, are. And because during lockdown, all of these orgs were putting through, inclusive policies, now when we're re-engaging, there's all these loopholes that weren't there before, where we have to accept trans-identified people into our spaces.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought of it like that, but you're right. Because of lockdown, the opportunity for that to encounter a trans woman in the public bathroom, it's been limited, hasn't it? I've sometimes wondered what I'm going to do. Like, one day it's going to happen, and how am I going to react? And my plan is I'm just going to pull my phone out, start recording, and then say, look, you're not meant to be in here. You're making women feel uncomfortable. Yes, it might be what the law is. It might be legal for you to be in here, but I think deep down, that it's wrong. It's a little bit wrong, and it makes women uncomfortable. And just see if I get smashed in the face or not.
I doubt it. They're all talk.
Yeah.
I've noticed policy is where I've really noticed it, because I work in a women's only area, and we are trying to open a support group in my local region. And as part of the funding, we now have to tick a box that says that we will include gender diverse people in our women only thing. And we had to tick the box or we won't get funding. But I also pointed out when we applied that the law protects sex specific spaces, and that was acknowledged by the agency that I've had to apply to. So it's a fine line, and at the moment, sex is still protected. However, I expect that there will be challenges to those sort of things.
Didn't you say a couple episodes back that you had a trans woman show up to one of these women's only groups?
Yeah, I was really mad.
What was the reaction? Yeah, here you go.
Well, I walked into like a women's only support group, and I was there with a woman who had been sexually assaulted, and she was not in a very good space emotionally. And I walked into the room and sat down, and I noticed there was a trans-identifying person there. It was basically a man with breasts. Like, he didn't look in any other way female except that he had breasts. And I was immediately triggered. And I was uncomfortable, and we had to go around the room and talk about why we were there. And pop-ups. And each person was sharing their reason for being there. Either they were a support worker like myself, or they were a victim of sexual assault or whatever. But it was a very emotional conversation.
Yeah, I bet.
And I was very aware that there was a man in the room. So I held back part of my story, which was the reason that I'm a support worker, is because I've had experience of that sort of thing. So I held back that deliberately because of the male being in the room. And I'm sure that there are other people in the room who did, but unfortunately, the person who was most vulnerable wasn't able to keep that information in. And this person sat there, I was watching him, and he squirmed and he wriggled and whatever, but he didn't leave the room or excuse himself. And when it was his turn to speak, he started saying something about football and cricket.
What?
And
Oh
I'm
my
sitting
God.
there and I had steam coming out of my ears. So
Oh
at
my
the end of the
God.
meeting, I pulled across the woman and said, look, there's a vulnerable woman here talking about her sexual assault, and a whole bunch of other people here, who are here for reasons around that. And you've got a male in the room. Oh, he's not a male, And they said, well, you have to deal with this. And I rang the agency who runs those meetings, and they just said, oh, look, you'll have to take it up with the group. And of course, the group didn't want to act. Anyway, I cracked it and said, I'll never go back. I sent them a nasty email. I said, I won't be taking any more clients there. And about 4 weeks later, I got a phone call from a friend that said, oh, they've sent a memo around to all the people that attend the group to ask if they mind having that person there. And I said, oh, yeah, what was consensus? And she said, well, most people said, no, they don't want him there. But a lot of people said that they didn't feel that they could say so.
There you
And
go.
I thought, that'd be it.
Yeah.
But then since then, I found out that some of the women that attended that group were, practically trans friendly, going, oh, it's all, I'll just be kind and let them come. And that group actually piqued them because they never thought they'd have that experience in real life. It was always a hypothetical. And then to be actually in the room and feel the tension in the air is a completely different experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've got to wonder what goes through a man's mind to think that it's appropriate for him to be there.
Well, he has a choice of LGB meetings. He has a choice of men's meetings, and he chose to go to the women's meeting. And I think that's because women are socially conditioned to do the emotional labor of men, and because we're conditioned to be kind as well. And he wanted to take advantage of both of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. God, it just makes me so angry. And you've reminded me of that trans-identified male that's now on the board of directors of Red Tent Australia.
Yeah.
Was that last year that happened, I think?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Yeah, like Red Tent. I don't know heaps about it. Do you know much?
No, I just know that there was a kerfuffle.
Yeah, so Red Tent, from what I understand, it's meant to be for women. The red tent reference is to menstrual huts, where women are sent in other countries, other cultures, when they've got their period. They're not allowed to be with with males. So they get sent off to these little huts, and sometimes they die from the cold. Sometimes they die from hemorrhaging if they've got, complications with their period. So I think Red Tent is like a place for women to come together and I don't know, share stories and sort of like a support group. And now you've got this trans-identified male sitting on the board of directors. It's creepy. It does feel like appropriation. Sorry, I'm thinking of what's her name? The Rachel Dolezal. What's her name? The woman, the white woman
the woman who identified as black.
Yeah. It's very much like that, but it's 10 times ickier when a trans-identified male does it, due to the power imbalance between males and females. It's just off. It's really off.
There's a women's prison here in Australia who has a very inclusive trans policy and has a number of trans women prisoners present. And their inclusive policy was put in place when the governor of the prison was a transgender woman. Or a transgender woman, a male identifying, a male who identifies as a woman. So yeah, the governor of the prison.
Wow, I hadn't heard that one.
Yeah, that is just dodgy. It's Ravenhall is the name of the place. You can look it up.
Is that in New South Wales?
And they were actually made the news recently because they were nominated for a trans inclusive award for their inclusivity, and people objected to it being a prison because it's a women's prison getting this award for being inclusive to trans people. And so they sort of like snuck out of it, but it was in the media recently.
Oh, wow, I missed all that. Where's Ravenhall? Which state?
I'm not sure. I think New South Wales. I'm not sure, but I think New South Wales.
Okay. Look, I did reach out to that organisation, Sisters Inside.
Yep.
Who work with, women in prison and women leaving prison. I did reach out to them to try and find out what they think, and they just ignored me, didn't respond. So I imagine they're in a very difficult position with all of this as well.
Yeah. I think all women's only orgs are in a very difficult position because our funding depends on being inclusive.
Yeah. And we've seen what happened to Feminist Legal Clinic this year.
Yeah, that was horrendous.
For those that don't know, Feminist Legal Clinic are in Sydney. They'd been awarded a city council grant, sort of, not a grant, but free office space. And they were running for a couple of years, and then trans activists caught wind that Anna Kerr, the principal lawyer there, was working with Women's Human Rights Campaign, and Sydney City Council withdrew their accommodation grant, kicked them out of the premises, and in the same meeting that they decided that, they awarded, I can't remember, something like, let's say $100,000 to the Sydney Mardi Gras or something like that. Just so insulting.
It is. And there's this argument that trans women are so marginalised. They're the most marginalised women, and all these statistics are exaggerated about them suicide.
But they're not women. For our viewers, they're not women. They're men.
Yes, they're not women. Sorry, that trans women, like the most marginalised women, and marginalised people don't have that power. They don't have the power to get a women's only organisation shut down. They just don't.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to some things that have been in the news over the last few weeks. So here in Victoria, this year the Labor government here passed legislation banning gay conversion therapy, which is great. But in that bill, it also included banning attempts to change or convert a person's gender identity, which has made it very difficult for psychologists to offer support to young people that are gender questioning or suffering from gender dysphoria. It was a really contentious bill. A number of Liberal Party members in the upper house didn't vote for it. Louise Staley was one of those. She spoke really strongly against this bill, and had a lot to say about lesbians being converted into trans men. It was a really good speech. But now, because the Victorian Liberal Party have just changed leadership, so now, what's his name? Is it Matthew Guy? Yeah, Matthew Guy is the new opposition leader here in Victoria. And they've come out at the end of September and said, we will not be amending I'm going to call it the Gay Away Bill, because that's what I think it is. But the official name is the Change or Suppression something or other. I can't remember it now. So they came out at the end of September and said, we will not be amending this law if we get voted in next year. There's a Victorian state election next year. And now someone's leaked audio from this Zoom call, and in it, the leader of the National Party, so the Nationals and Liberal are the coalition, the leader of that party, I've got to read it out. From a Nationals point of view, we will not be supporting James on this position, that is, of not amending the bill, and he can go and get fucked. Simple as that. So there's a bit of conflict going on in the Liberal Party at the moment here in Victoria over this bill.
So there should be.
Legislation.
Should be the Labor Party. Like everyone should be up in arms about this bill. It's funny to think of politicians talking about that stuff like I do with as much passion. And it's a shame it's the Liberals. But one of my issues with this conversion therapy bill is that I spoke to my GP about this. I speak to a lot of medical professionals and, mental health professionals and autism experts about this issue because, I can. I spoke to my GP about this and I said, what happens when someone presents to you, like a child presents to you and says, oh, I've got, I think I'm the opposite sex. And he said, I refer them to a gender clinic.
Dangerous.
That's it.
Very dangerous.
That's them. And we know that affirmation only is the only way at the gender clinic. So there's no safeguarding at all. It's right. You think that you're the opposite sex and you're 10 years old, we will affirm you. And they tell the parents, if you don't agree to this child going on the affirmation path, then they're 10 times more likely to kill themselves. And the parents go, oh, okay. And they agree. And then because the parents agree, then the drugs start, the puberty suppressants, and then the hormones start. And, even surgery, like we all know that there's 15-year-olds having chest surgery. It's just this bill is a fast track into the gender identity industry. And it puts psychologists, counsellors, GPs, and anyone who comes into contact with this child, teachers, anybody, parents even.
Parents,
and there's been cases where children have been taken off parents by DHS. If they say, no, you're wrong, this bill has a potential to have those people charged. Yeah.
And it's prison time. It can be prison time under this legislation. And I think it's up to $10,000 fine.
It's
just
horrendous.
Shocking.
Absolutely horrendous. And how the Labor Party, how can any of these politicians sleep at night? So they must know, because before these bills even get to Parliament, they go over them with a fine-tooth comb. And so did their advisors and everybody involved. So they know all the ins and outs of this. They can't deny that they're aware that people will take advantage of this as far as gender identity is concerned.
Yeah, so look, now is the time, if you're in Victoria, to write to the shadow cabinet, the Liberal National MPs, and let them know what you think. And I'd also like to point out that in the UK, Liz Truss, the Equalities, what is she? The Equalities Minister or something?
Yes.
She has just said that she's going to try and introduce legislation to ban the encouraging a child towards transitioning.
Yeah.
Complete opposite to where we're at here in Victoria. So you can mention that in your letter as well, if you choose to write.
And so they should. Because we know that adults, like detransitioners, are reporting, and we know that adults are grooming kids online and saying that they're trans, and parents are grooming children online, grooming children, and then the kids are hopping online, and it's all being affirmed. It's awful.
Yeah, there's now families out there that don't disclose their child's sex and refer to them as they, them. And it's like, way to confuse the shit out of a child. Like, come on.
Yeah. And it's awkward having those conversations. I've got kids, and I talk to them about all this gender stuff and about sex being binary and the difference between sex and gender. And the kids are like, I don't want to talk about it. But, you have to have these difficult conversations, because there are a lot of people out there that are going to tell them otherwise.
So how old are your youngest, if you don't mind?
8, nearly 9.
And
she's very gender non-conforming. She's like me at her age.
Yeah.
She's a little tomboy. She likes wearing her siblings' clothes, and she prefers her brother's clothes. And she'll chuck his tracksuit pants and a rip curl t-shirt on and head out into the yard. And she's but my older two daughters are very feminine in appearance and very gender conforming, and my daughter's Yeah, a bit out there, which I love.
And has she been exposed to any of this stuff at school? Like,
no, well, she's the kids play video games, and my kids are all on each other's things to spy on each other. When I can't be on there because they're on apps that I've never even heard of. And my eldest daughter's an adult, she's 20, and I make sure she's on all the apps that they're on to spy. And they discovered that my daughter was pretending to be 13 and talking to other 13-year-olds.
right.
Now, the tone of the conversation was age appropriate for a 13-year-old. That was there was nothing, that I wouldn't want an 8-year-old to hear. But the fact that she was pretending to be a different age and these kids had the potential to groom her into more adult concepts was a bit of a wake up for me, because I'm quite onto these things. And I had a little talk with her, and she said, look, I said I was older because I'm only 8 and I'm meant to be 10 or something like that. And I said, well, I'm glad you didn't reveal your true age, but, don't get taken into conversation streams in a group of kids that are older than you, because that's how it seems to start for these young kids.
Yeah. There's definitely that peer contagion element as well.
Well, lockdowns force children online socially. My kids never had a problem with putting down their laptop and going outside, or putting down the iPad and going outside until the first lockdown, because they would be doing all their schoolwork online, and then all their social activity was online as well. And the social activity has maintained even though the school's gone back. And I found it incredibly difficult to get my kids off the screens.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
there is definitely more of an opportunity for people to coerce kids into little, rooms in video games and chats in video games and things.
And are there any non-binary kids at your kids' schools yet?
Only my teenagers one of my kids is in year 7, and she said that there's a couple of kids that identify as non-binary. They're just typical sort of gender non-conforming autistic kind of kids. But she said that a lot of the young girls before they've even reached puberty or finished puberty are all identifying as bisexual or queer or bisexual.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really common. And she doesn't my daughter doesn't understand it. But yeah, she said that a lot of her friends, and I'm thinking these kids have never even had relationships, and yet they're all already identifying at 12 years old with certain sexualities. I mean, I was pretty naive, but I'm sure at 12 I wasn't thinking about, announcing to the public which way I was sexually aligned.
Do you think it's like this attempt to be cool and
yes,
be
I do.
Yeah.
And I think it's washed down. I'm a cynical person, and I think it's all washed down through porn culture.
Yeah.
That, children are being hypersexualized at younger and younger ages. And so, there's that pressure to be, to appeal to the male gaze, the old lesbian for the male gaze, that, oh, I'm bisexual, I'm cool.
Yeah.
Or queer as well, whatever that means.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kids identifying as queer, and
queer apparently can just mean that you're what is it, demisexual. So demisexual is you're only attracted to people that really well, and you've sort of formed a emotional connection with.
Yeah,
that's what I understand.
Well, I'm demisexual then. Well, there you go.
So yeah, you and me, we're both queer now.
Yeah, we'll get a float at Pride. Oh, that's funny. No, it's just sad, kids shouldn't have to be thinking about these concepts until they're older. What 10-year-old needs to identify with any kind of sexuality?
I really think
publicly, privately they can think about all sorts of stuff, but to publicly say to all their family and friends, or to their friends, or to their peer group at school, I am bisexual when you're 11 or 12. Yeah. That's heavy.
It's kind of the new goth movement, really.
Sexuality,
I know it's been said a lot, but I agree. I think that porn has played a huge part in this, and it's like it's the current trend amongst kids is to declare all this stuff about their sexual orientation or their gender identity and be praised for it. And I don't know if did you ever read Brave New World?
No, I didn't.
It's on Stan as well. They've made it into a TV show, which was a really good TV show, I thought. But I'm not giving away too much of the plot here, but in the show, it's like this utopian future where if you have any sort of negative feeling, you can just pop a pill and the feeling will go away. And so all they know is good feelings. And some of the principles of the society is everyone's non-monogamous. Everyone shares everything because they're all linked by this brain implant type thing. They don't have parents because they're created in test tubes. So the women have been completely removed from the gestation process. And they're raised in these nurseries where they're conditioned towards a certain tier in society. So you got the cleaners and the workers at the bottom, and you've got like the alphas at the top. And but they also condition the children sexually.
Yeah.
Now they weren't able to show it in the TV show, but they were able to describe it in the book. It's by Aldous Huxley. So in the book, there's like this creepy, icky scene where kids are being taught how to sexually pleasure each other. And so what you end up with is this society where there's orgies going on every single night of the week, and everyone's on these pills where they don't feel any bad feelings. And I see similarities between what's happening with all this gender identity stuff and kids declaring their sexual orientation at 10 years old or whatever. I see similarities. Yeah, OnlyFans. Like being a sex worker is empowering, according to some.
But it's not the reality.
Yeah.
There's not the reality. I've worked with women who have exited the sex industry for 23 years. Yeah. And I'm a hardened swerve now. Like I'm so against the sex industry. It's not the reality that they're being sold. They're being sold the fantasy, and that's it's the media selling the sex as a product. And it's to oil the machines of big pharma, big porn, and they're being sold a lie. Like they're being sold that a McDonald's burger looks like it does in the ad, and instead you get this greasy, disgusting thing that makes you sick. And it's the same with the way they're selling sex to kids. We're also living in a society that's increasingly sort of divided, and the usual social outlets that kids had when we were kids have gone. You can't just go, I'm going up, a 5-year-old can't walk up to their friend's house like 5 doors away because nobody's out in the front yard anymore. Everyone's at work. There's not the community that there was when we were growing up. And I think, as a society, we're becoming more, pushed apart, and also politically as well. Like there's all sorts of things going on where we're a fragmented society. And I think kids have been a victim of that. Even families are separated geographically or, whatever. And I think, so kids, it's natural for children to want to connect with each other. And the opportunities for doing that, particularly during the pandemic as well, haven't been there. And so this online world and all the propaganda that they see online has become far more powerful than it would in the olden days when we would all be outside just making friends with kids up the road because they live there, not for all these other superficial reasons. Like we're being conditioned into conformity. And kids, that's really powerful for children whose personalities haven't quite formed. They want acceptance and they want love. And the reason that I think the trans thing is so appealing to, say, autistic kids, kids who've experienced trauma, like kids who are in out-of-home care and things like that, is because they're desperate for connection. They're desperate to feel normal and to get some positivity in their life. and then they get tricked into joining this transgender cult, and they get all this false positivity. Like there's a young boy will be putting makeup on and look absolutely ridiculous, and people will say, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, and you're stunning and brave, and he doesn't have the social experience to understand that that's absolute bullshit, and people are telling him a lie because they're grooming him into their cult.
Yeah. And also what I think these, trans identifying kids aren't being told is how limited your dating options are going to be. I think the way it's being presented is like, oh, you're loved and accepted and blah, blah, everyone accepts you. It's not reality. And I don't think it's ever going to be reality.
And the kids who transition are physically disfigured as well. So, the trans identifying girl that I know is she's under 5 feet tall. And she took puberty blockers and now has had chest surgery. And she's under 5 feet tall. And the testosterone that she's on is affected her weight. And so, there's all sorts of things where she doesn't look quite masculine, she doesn't look feminine, but she also doesn't look healthy, and that's going to impact on how people perceive her.
Yeah, absolutely. I just saw a TikTok earlier today or yesterday with, some 20-year-olds talking about she hooked up with a male who had been put on puberty blockers as a child. And she was making fun of how small his penis was, that it was a micro penis. And then at the end of it, it was just gross. She's gone, but I'm going to suck it anyway. I was like, oh, guys, kids, come on, go camping. I often think, if I was a mum and my kid came out as trans, I would just take them on a journey around Australia with no phone, no internet for, a good 3 months, just to get them away from it all. No mirrors either. And just get them into nature, back into nature.
Wasn't there some research in the UK where children who had been in lockdown for an extended period decided not to go through with their transition? Like they'd started off, I'm whatever. And then after being stuck at home for 9 months, a lot of them desisted and they haven't gone on to have, hormones and surgery. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I've heard a few anecdotes around that, but not so much research. But yeah, good point. Yeah. So non-binary has been in the news here in Australia this week as well. I'll just open the article. It's actually an excerpt from this book by a woman. I'm going to call her a woman. Her name, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Yves Rees. So she's actually written a book about her non-binary journey, and Alan and Unwin have decided to publish it. It's called All About Yves, Notes from a Transition. And so she's female. I'll just read out this paragraph. So she's going to the movies and she needs to use the toilet. This is in The Age, by the way, and the Sydney Morning Herald. The gents' toilets is emitting a miasma of stale urine. Plus, it probably only has one stall. What if it's already occupied? The ladies, however, is risky. Since I cropped my hair and started binding my breasts, I've been attracting hostile stares from women perturbed by my presence in this feminine space. Even though I avert my eyes and scuttle straight to a stall, I feel each curious look, each cold stare, each double take. They burn hot on my skin. Thoughts? Here's something that I found interesting from that. I honestly, I'm not sure that happens to women who have short hair.
No.
There plenty of women have short hair and still use the female toilets, and no one's giving them a hard time. The other thing that really stood out for me is that she's binding her breasts. So why does non-binary mean that you have to hide your breasts?
Yeah.
Why, like, if we sort of flip it around, if a male declares himself to be non-binary, why isn't he trying to grow breasts? You know? Yeah, I found that interesting. So this is the kind of drivel that the Age is printing on these issues at a time where in the UK, the BBC have just exposed what lesbians have been going through for years now.
Yeah.
That's where we're at still.
Well, I've noticed the Age, SBS and ABC, they're publishing an article promoting gender ideology in some way, shape or form every single day. Now, even 12 months ago, maybe it was a couple of weeks, but now it's all the time. Yeah. All the time. It is a trend. And, you know, I don't know what the current statistics are of people who identify with all these genders, but certainly still the majority of people don't. So I don't understand why this minority is getting so much airtime when genuine minorities are still getting zero.
Yeah, yeah.
And as for non-binary, what a crock, right?
You keep talking. I forgot to switch the power on my laptop. But I'll be back. I'm still listening.
Now this is dangerous. Well, she's back.
Back. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I just think non-binary is such a crock of crap because it's all appearance-based. Otherwise, we'd all be non-binary. Like everybody I know has got interests that are gender non-conforming. That's everybody right. I know That's sometimes right. dresses like the opposite sex. When I'm out in the farm, like, you know, I brush my hair for you guys. You know, when I'm out here on the farm shoveling poo, I'm in a flanny, pair of dirty old jeans and a pair of Blundstones. Oh, I'm non-binary. It's just ridiculous. And yeah, I've had short hair too. I've, you know, shaved my head. I've worn gender non-conforming clothes. I live in band t-shirts, you know. If that's what makes me non-binary. But then there's also that other stuff, you know, like the interests that we have. Like as everyone who knows me knows, I'm a massive Formula One fan. Now, my son lost count of the times where people said to him, oh, you went to the Formula One with your dad. And he's like, no, my mum. And they went, oh, you know, I didn't believe him. And especially his little friends, you know. You know, my interests have never been gender conforming. And, you know, the fact that that makes me something other than a woman is so ridiculous. Ridiculous.
It's insulting, I think. I agree. I think probably 98% of people are gender non-conforming. Women do not fit the Barbie doll stereotype for the most part, and men do not fit the G.I. Joe stereotype for the most part. And I'm referring to that stupid the gender spectrum from Mermaids or whoever came out with it. So, you know, technically, yeah, we're all a little bit gender non-conforming. And in this article, she even says something about, so some people are saying that being non-binary is just like a trend or a cry for attention. And it's like, well, yeah, it is. I think it is. It's a way to make yourself special and different to other people.
And it's also appropriating the LGB as well. You know, it's like all these identities have attached themselves to lesbian, gay and bi and bandwagoning on the rainbow. Like half the non-binaries are heterosexual. All the people that I know who identify as non-binary at the moment are middle-aged autistic women.
Wow.
And so they've attached themselves to this identity that's giving them all the privilege of belonging to the LGBT community. You you know, privilege, I said in inverted commas, obviously, because, you know, lesbian, gay and bi were disadvantaged groups compared to, you know, in previous times, and even to this day are disadvantaged compared to, say, straight, white, whatever, you know.
Yeah. When I went to that protest at Melbourne Uni that was organised by trans activists denouncing Dr. Holly Lawford-Smith, the women's officer that was there, she wasn't actually a woman, she was non-binary. And when one of the men started throwing water at our comrade Cheryl, this non-binary woman, who was also Indian, I think, or Sri Lankan, she starts yelling at the guy throwing the water, going, "Stop, now this reflects very badly on me, and you are putting me in danger as a trans non-binary woman, a non-binary person of color." And I was just like, you know, anyone that looks at you is just going to see a woman, and they're going to treat you accordingly. And you're not being oppressed because you're non-binary. You're being oppressed if you're facing oppression in your day-to-day life. It's because you're female and a woman of color. No one's looking at you thinking you're non-binary. It's just like, oh.
I was a women's officer at uni, right? And I can't understand why they still have a women's office if anyone can be a woman.
Yeah.
You know, if they're allowing, you know, non-binary people and men, why have a women's office?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Now there was another very funny bit in this article where she starts implying that non-binary people actually have it worse than transgender people. So I'm just going to try and find the section. Sorry. You can keep talking while I find it.
No, that's all right.
Okay.
This was inevitable though, because, you know, trans gets all the attention, and so it was inevitable that the non-binaries would try and one up them, because they're the super straights, really, the non-binaries.
Oh God, look, she even quotes I'm not sure how to pronounce his surname, but Alok Vaid.
Alok, who was talking about little girls.
This is the dude that said little girls are kinky.
Yeah.
Like a pedophile. I'm sorry. Yeah. She quotes him as though he's, you know, some sort of bastion of truth in all of this. But yeah, at some point in here, she says something like along the lines of transgender people have it easier because they're still fitting into the binary, but the non-binary people, you know, like society just doesn't recognize us. We don't even know how many non-binary people there are in Australia, because the Australian Bureau of Statistics doesn't record it in the census, which is wrong now. So I don't know how old that book is that she's written, but remember the census that we just did under male and female? There, if you clicked the link, it would take you to, you could pick non-binary, but you still had to pick male or female.
Yeah.
And if you didn't pick male or female and you just picked non-binary, then you would be randomly assigned a male or female gender, which I just think is hilarious.
That's funny. Oh, they'd be dark on that.
Yeah.
But, you know, this stuff, this is not this innocent thing. You know, it affects statistics.
That's right.
It affects all sorts of really important things for men and women.
Yep.
It affects crime. It affects funding.
Mm-hmm.
It misrepresents the amount of people, the sex of the people using sex-specific services. it's, you know, it's far more sinister than it seems.
It is. And you know, it was pointed out by women in the UK that, you know, the census data is used to, you know, formulate policies and legislation to address the needs of the population. And if you start skewing, like messing with that, and it's going to have an impact on how we provide public services for the public. Yeah, yeah, totally. But I don't know, look, I actually wouldn't, I know people might jump on me for this, but I actually wouldn't mind seeing the male female option and a gender identity option.
Yeah.
Because I think that would be really useful data for us to have, to see, well, you know, how many people are rejecting their biology. And here in Australia, like, if it's a tiny amount, then why are we turning all this legislation upside down to suit their needs?
And also then we get some idea of the age group and can say, okay, well, if it's kids between the, you know, if it's young people between this age and this age, or, you know, people, you know, middle-aged men, for example, a lot of older gynephiles come out in middle age, then they can look at the other aspects that influence people at that time in their life, like, you know, access to mental health support, midlife crisis, a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah, it is useful information, and it will be useful to going forward to compare today's statistics to future statistics.
Yeah. Look, I think it'll blow over eventually, and
it has to, because it's not fact-based.
That's right. And I actually think it will be young people turning against it and saying, "No, this isn't cool anymore." And that really starts to make the shift, at least among that age group. Yeah.
Well, it's a bit like tattoos. You know, a couple of years ago, everyone was getting tattoos, and there's been a movement away from getting like full sleeves and things like that. People would be getting them a bit more discreetly, or they're not getting them at all. You know, and a couple of years ago, if you didn't have tats, you were like not cool. Well, I'm not cool. But yeah, and all the, you know, I've got young kids of varying ages, and it's interesting, you know, because now someone says, "Oh, I'm trans," or "I'm non-binary," and they roll their eyes. Whereas a few years ago, I was like, "Oh, you know, this is so wonderful." And I've even noticed, because I'm friends with a lot of my kids' friends on social media, I'm even friends with some of the trans kids and the non-binary kids, and they'll post up some, you know, trans propaganda, and I've been counting the likes, and I haven't been putting little laugh emojis on them, but I've been counting the likes, and I've noticed that, you know, 2 years ago they would post something that was purely trans propaganda and there would be like 20-30 likes, and oh, this is so wonderful. And now, you know, they'll be lucky if they get 1 or 2, because people are starting to wake up. And you know, that Dave Chappelle special, I think he said things that we've only been allowed to think, apart from us TERFs who just say it. But you know, people are starting to think, well, hang on, why are these men, you know, so powerful when they're supposed to be so marginalized? Why is everything about trans? Why are women suddenly being called chest feeders and menstruators instead of women? Like, average people are starting to notice and wake up. And I think, as that happens, as that slowly happens, but we've got to remember, here in Australia, we're also being bombarded by the media that sends out a clear message not to speak up against it, because they're only promoting one side. So people sort of don't want to go, excuse me, I don't understand. They're too afraid, because when you do say, oh, well, you know, why is this non-binary or trans person being platformed when a woman isn't, you get your head bitten off by trans activists. And you know, the media is pushing and pushing and pushing this ideology. So until we get pushback like they have in the UK, and also thanks to Dave Chappelle, the US, until our media, our mainstream media, steps up and says, well, okay, there are different sides to this story, you know, we're kind of stuck.
Well, just today, the Sydney Morning Herald published an article about the Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Psychiatrists.
Ooh, yes.
They've brought, it was a while back, a month or two ago. They brought out a sort of new, more cautious guidelines around puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for kids, and emphasizing the need for, you know, proper psychiatric or psychological exploration. And it was actually a really balanced article.
Wow.
Yeah. Did you see it yet?
Yeah, I did actually.
Yeah.
But yay, Sydney Morning Herald.
Yeah,
Yay.
yeah, yeah.
If you're watching. But no, this a little thing like that is huge. It's huge. They'll get a massive pushback and they might even delete it. But the fact that they've had the courage, you know, to get it past the editors and go, okay, we'll run with that. That's massive.
Yeah.
Good.
I can't help but wonder if, you know, events in the UK and Dave Chappelle has influenced that editorial decision. But
I've noticed some of the wokesters that kicked me out of the left a couple of years ago, and like they kicked me out. I've always been this way. Like I've always, you know, been a feminist, and they know I'm a radical feminist, you know, and I'm proud of that. But yeah, I got kicked out of factions of the left, and of course all these people have got all their pronouns in their bios and Black Lives Matter and all this crap, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and I've noticed that a lot of those people have removed those things from their bios on social media, like all the stuff that is synonymous with trans activism, you know. They all seem to have, you know, Black Lives Matter, Trans Lives Matter, ACAB, you know, F Nazis, you know, they just, all their bios have that stuff. And I've noticed some of these real nasty leftists, since that Dave Chappelle thing, the pronouns are slowly disappearing. So
wow. Oh, that's promising.
I think the hypocrisy has been shown out. You know, you can't say, oh, we only value Black trans people's lives, you know, because that's basically what they're saying when they say Black Lives Matter. Because if they valued Black lives, they'd value, you know, Indigenous women in custody. They'd value the Black women that are overrepresented in prisons all over the world. You know, there's a whole, and they would, you know, they're talking crap. They're only valuing Black trans people.
All right, I have a confession to make. Last year after George Floyd, I got a bit carried away with Black Lives Matter, and I went to the protest here in Melbourne. And look, a little bit after that, it was the footage of that. It came out of the US. There are all these essentially white kids chanting Black Lives Matter, and they go past a restaurant and they're demanding that everyone eating outside out the front of this restaurant put their fist in the air in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. And this one woman like refused and just sat there with her arms crossed. And the way they were yelling at her and just crowding in on her, intimidating her, that was when I first went, oh, I'm not sure about this anymore. Like, I don't actually think that's a really good way to get your message out there, by intimidating some woman on the street that you've never met before, and you don't know her full thinking behind not putting her fist in the air. But anyway, I've gone off track a little bit.
But that was a movement that began for all the right reasons.
That's right.
George Floyd's death was horrific, and it was racism, and that movement began for all the right reasons. And then the trans activists appropriated it the same way they appropriated Antifa and Anonymous and all these other, you know, social justice movements. And they just stole it and made it about themselves. And they lost their meaning. They lost the meaning of something really, really important. And it became like the opposite of what it was supposed to be.
Yeah. If you go to the official Black Lives Matter website, it says in there, blah, 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 something about Black trans people, Black trans women. It's there. So, yeah. Anywho. What else has been happening in Australia? Actually, we're just going back to the trans the gay away legislation. New Zealand is facing that at the moment as well. I'm not sure if it's still going or if they've just finished up public oral submissions on that bill. But there was a wonderful submission made by Stella O'Malley, who runs GenSpect and some other groups, including, I think, for she runs a support group for detransitioners, I think. And she did an excellent submission, and talking about, you know, she had been through gender dysphoria as a child, so she knows what she's talking about. Now she's a clinical psychologist, and she knows what she's talking about. And I don't know if did you see her submission?
No, I didn't. Not yet.
Oh, it was, because then it just got really funny at the end. One of the women on the committee listening to the submissions tried to make out that, yes, but the work that you're doing isn't going to be, wouldn't be impacted by this legislation that we're proposing. And there's another man on the committee that just shut this woman down completely and said, no, of course her work would be captured by this legislation. You don't know how to interpret law and blah, blah. And he just like had a go at it. It was so funny and really promising that these, I think they're all MPs. These MPs are actually listening to what's being said and taking it on board, which, you know, is not what happened here in Victoria.
No, it isn't. No, it's good. There's hope for New Zealand.
Yeah.
They don't have self-ID yet, do they? They're trying to get it through the back door.
Yeah, they've just completed oral submissions for the self-ID bills.
I watched a lot of those. There's some amazing submissions.
Yeah,
they made a lot of sense.
Yeah, well done, New Zealand women.
Yeah. We didn't even, you know, we didn't even get a chance. Like everything that was done in Victoria was just pushed through with it, and we had barely any chance to have our voices heard. And not one, because I don't know, I can't remember who I asked, but I sent a letter to my local MP and I said, you know, what organisations, women's organisations were consulted about trans self-identification, and there were none, not one. It was all through the Royal, was it either ACON or one of those big agencies, LGB agencies, and the other was the Royal Children's Hospital. They were the only organisations that they had recommendations from. So not one women's organisation.
Wow. Yeah, shocking. It's happening everywhere, isn't it?
We have to fight back. We just have to push back. We have to normalise. And this is why we're doing this too. We've got to normalise talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
Because the threat is real. You know, it's not a hypothetical thing about, I'm going to see something in the toilet and be uncomfortable. You know, it's men in our hospital rooms. It's, you know, it's at the times where you're most vulnerable, where this is going to impact on you, at your, you know, domestic violence group or your sexual assault recovery group or your AA meeting or your, you know, all sorts of stuff where you really don't want to be around biological males. That's when it's going to impact you, when you're so vulnerable that you're least likely to be able to oppose it. So we have to speak out when we're strong, when we're not in that position, for those people who are in that position, or for when the time comes when we're all there. I mean, we're all going to get old and incapacitated at some stage. You know, do we, you know, want, you know, trans identifying males in our intimate spaces when we're vulnerable?
Wiping our bums when we can't reach anymore.
Or even when if you've got young children, you know, do you want them, you know, staying in the female dorm at camp, you know? Girl Guides. Oh,
yeah, I was just going to say.
Guides.
Yeah.
Girl Guides. Was that UK or USA, the Girl Guides this morning?
UK, I think.
Yeah. Well, Guides is aimed at girls from the age 10 to 18, but specifically this was age 10 to 14. And they had a happy asexual day today. So they are basically promoting asexuality again, even though it's asexuality, which means that you're not particularly interested in sex, promoting a sexuality or identification with a sexuality to small female children. Now, tell me again that that's not grooming for pornography. Tell me that, again, that's not normalizing adult concepts to small kids. From the guides, which were so wholesome, they were one of the few places where girls could go and be empowered and get away from all that hypersexualized stuff and learn how to tie knots and learn how to fish and do all the things that the boys could do. That was the beauty of guides.
Yeah. And on the asexuality stuff, because I think it's Asexual Awareness Week last week. The TQ plus of the alphabet soup have altered the definition of asexual. So whereas it used to mean that you're just a person that wasn't interested in sex, end of story, now it's a spectrum. and there's like all these different minute variations. It's just crazy. Yeah, like, well, come on.
I'm learning new things about myself every day. I'm a demi-asexual, whatever. What else am I? You know,
I'm a queer heterosexual.
I forgot I was queer too. Yeah. That's just embarrassing.
Just before we wind up, because I think we're coming up on an hour, I just wanted to say well done to all the women that got involved in the Chalk About It action yesterday. Brilliant stuff. So Sydney, there were five women. Come on, Sydney, let's get it up to 20 women at the next direct action day. They went out the front of the ABC and wrote all sorts of women's sex-based rights slogans around the place. Also down in Tasmania, Launceston, I think it was, out the front of Parliament, I think it was. And I'm sure there were other places as well, but they're the two that stood out in my mind. Yeah. So,
and well done New Zealand, to Kate, the organizer. Yeah, Kate.
Well done, Kate.
Now, well, we're out of lockdown now. Only a few days ago, Melbourne finally was set free. So hopefully we can get a few women together and have some more in-person stuff, either social meetups or hopefully also some direct action too.
Definitely.
So, and if you're in Melbourne and you're interested in being involved, get in touch with us.
Do it. All right. Well, good to see you, Ange.
Yes, thank you. Then happy Halloween to everybody. I've got my bats in the background, but I was going to wear an outfit, like a witchy outfit, but I thought I would wear something really, really terrifying, which is
shock horror.
I thought that would fill everyone with absolute terror. The definition of woman.
That's transphobic.
Yeah, so spooky. I'm gonna eat the kids' lollies and then have an early night tonight. I'm not going to be going off trick-or-treating, but nice talking to you all. And we've noticed that a few people have followed our humble little talk, so thank you, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And subscribe, and we'll see you.
We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Ciao.
Bye.